Hey vape fans, welcome to the Mount Baker Vapor video tutorial series. I'm Michael. Today we're going to be talking about a topic we've been getting a few requests on and some comments. We're going to be going over flooding and dry hits in different types of atomizers and cartomizer tanks. So first we'll go over flooding and dry hits in a cartomizer tank. So generally when you're filling a carto tank, like we went over in a previous video, you take your tank off and you take off this top cap. After you fill the juice in there, if you put your top cap on, what it's going to do is it's going to cause pressure and it's going to push juice up into your cartomizer, not just the polyfill, but also down that center post. So the more juice you get in there, it can cause it to start gurgling. Just put this back on my device. Put the top cap back on. Put on my drip tip. And now when I'm taking a pull on it, it's got a really bad gurgle to it. So when you get that flooding down the center post, what I do is I just grab a paper towel. All you vapors know what a good friend paper towels are. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the carto tank upside down and I'm just going to blow into it. And then you're going to see actually a bunch of juice in that paper towel. I'm just going to keep doing that until I don't hear the gurgling anymore. So now that center should be clear. And when you screw it back onto your device and you go to inhale, you don't hear that gurgling anymore. Now on the opposite side of this, sometimes your carto will get dry. Some things that might cause this are the viscosity of your liquid is too high, so if you're using a higher VG percentage and you don't have the proper amount of holes in it, either that or your carto is just getting gunked up so it's not absorbing as well as it used to. Anytime I get a dry hit on this, what I'm going to do is I just pull up the cap a little bit and you see bubbles start to come up. And then I don't take the cap off all the way because I don't want to flood it. I just pull it up about halfway and it's going to force a little bit of liquid in there. And then that should get rid of your dry hit issue. So those two techniques should get rid of all your dry hit and flooding issues in a carto tank. So now we're going to move forward to a top coil tank. So for a top coil, anything like an iClear 30, a Vivi Nova, these are all those tanks where the coil is actually screwed onto the top of the unit. We went over that in a previous video as well. So let's go ahead and fill this guy up. Tilt this at a 45-degree angle. And I'm just going to fill it and let it go down the sides. And what I like to do is just rotate it a little bit as I fill it. And that's just making sure that the viscosity of the liquid doesn't cause it to overflow and make a mess. So I'm going to fill this right about to the base of that silicone, but a little short of that. Right there is just perfect. So now we have our full Vivi Nova tank here. As you can see, it looks good. Right now I'm just going to let those wicks saturate. That's going to make sure you don't get any dry hits. If you were to have filled it right down that center, you're going to get a gurgle right away. And since this is a top coil, and this will hold true for any top coil, if it does have a flood, unlike the carto tank, you're going to want to hold it straight up, drip tip in the air, and blow it downward. And that's going to make sure any of that juice that got down that center post is going to go into your paper towel instead of into your mouth. So on the opposite end of the spectrum, you can get dry hits on these. One of the most common ways to get a dry hit is filling it and firing it immediately. Instead of doing that, what I like to do is let it sit for 2 or 3 minutes and then give it a couple pulls on the drip tip without hitting your firing button. What we're doing is we're priming it just to make sure that wick is fully saturated and you're not going to get that nasty dry hit. If it's not a fresh coil and you're getting a dry hit, one of the issues just might be your wicks aren't wicking the liquid to the coil. So occasionally, if I'm using a top coil tank, I kind of just got in the habit of flipping it sideways and kind of rotating it around, and that's just making sure everything's fully saturated. I also don't generally wait until these are completely empty to refill. Once I get to about half a tank, that's generally where I'll go ahead and refill my liquid, just to make sure I don't get any dry hits. So after the few minutes of priming and those dry pulls, we should be ready to take a vape and not get that dry hit. Perfect. So if you still find that you're getting dry hits or flooding in a tank like this, just like in the Carto tank, it all comes down to your mixture. If you have a high PG liquid, and this is true with all tanks, high PG is going to be more likely to flood. High VG is going to be much more likely to get a dry hit. It just comes down to the thickness of the liquid. Generally, I use a 50-50 blend in all tanks, and I have minimal issues. So now that we've gone over how the top coil is going to work, we'll go over what a bottom coil Cartomizer will be like. So here I have a Kanger Evod, and since this is a bottom coil, it unscrews from the bottom, and I'm going to fill it here. So just like in that Vivi Nova, you see that center there. So that's your direct line to the drip tip. So I want to avoid putting any liquid in that hole. And I'm just going to fill it right down the side. These are a little bit more finicky. I'm going to be checking the levels because you can't fill it all the way up, because as you can see right there, that center post doesn't come all the way up. So I'm going to fill until I'm about 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch away from that point. And that'll do for right now. So now that we've screwed the base back onto the Kanger, we're going to let it sit just like that Vivi Nova. And that's to prime those wicks again to make sure you don't get a dry hit. Again, it's going to help to take those dry pulls on it. Also, it's going to help if it's attached to a device, because it's going to restrict the airflow and it's going to make the liquid more likely to go into the coil as you're sucking on it and creating that vacuum. As you're taking those dry pulls, you should see little bubbles coming up, and that's a good indicator that you're getting liquid to those coils. One thing I did not mention about the Vivi Nova is that you're much more likely to get a dry hit on it because it uses those top wicks. The liquid needs to use capillary action to go up the wicks and into the coil. So the opposite is going to be true with something like a Kanger or any bottom coil Cartomizer. Since your coil is completely submerged in the liquid, it's going to be more prone to flooding and you're less likely to get a dry hit. So now that it's all primed, you should be ready to take a hit. Perfect. Now once again, if you would have filled in that center post, you would have gotten a mouthful of liquid or a gurgling sound. If you do find that this tank is flooded, it's going to be just like the Carto tank. You're going to take a paper towel and you're going to hold it upside down. And then you can see the liquid getting into the paper towel there. So the reason you hold this one upside down is because you see these wicks are fully submerged. So if you had this right side up and imagine that there's a tank of liquid here and you're blowing liquid into it, all it's going to do is blow liquid into these wicks and into that center post, causing it to flood. So even though we only went over these 3 types of tanks, this should generalize to all the tanks that you're going to be using. So once again, it's either going to be a bottom coil, a top coil, or a Carto tank. I hope this answered some of your guys' questions, got rid of some of your frustration, and will help you out in the long run. And if you like our videos, again, don't forget to subscribe. If you're still having issues and you have questions, leave them in the comments below. We're always happy to answer them. And we'll see you next time.